Hello everybody, I am here to show you how to write a piece of orchestral music starting from scratch. I take it that you're probably a musician. Yes, because you're on this channel. So you may do EDM, or you might do hip hop, or you might be a folk singer. Yes, I'm talking about you, Melanie from Melbourne, or you, Stephen from Nottingham, or whatever. Anyway, what we're going to be doing today is starting from scratch, transferring the knowledge and skills you already have, and showing you how actually you can have quite a lot of fun writing orchestral music as well. Oh, but you don't have an orchestra? You haven't got an orchestra lying around in your home? No, most people don't, but you don't need one, of course, because there is a whole load of virtual instruments, some of which are eye-wateringly expensive and some of which are free. The one we're using today is called the BBC Symphony Orchestra Discover Edition from Spitfire Audio. Now, up until this week, actually, it would either cost you £50 or you would fill in a long questionnaire and wait 2 weeks. But now it's completely free and you can go to their site right now and download this orchestra, and it'll run on almost any computer because it's super compact and all the rest of it. And you get all the instruments of the orchestra. Look, you've got woodwind, you've got piccolo, flute, oboe, clarinet, bassoon. With brass, you have the horns over here. This is the way a classical orchestra is laid out. Then you have trumpets, trombone, bass trombone, and tuba. And you have the string section, violin 1, violin 2, viola, cellos, and at the back there, basses. And at the back, as far away as humanly possible from the conductor, is the percussion, because they're very loud. No, so look, what we're going to be doing is using this, a basic orchestral template, which is organized along similar lines, woodwinds at the top, then the brass, then the percussion, then the strings at the bottom. I'm doing this in Cubase, but you can literally do it in any DAW. You can do it in Bitwig, you can do it in FL Studio, Ableton, Logic, GarageBand, whatever. All you have to do when you put this thing together is you create 2 tracks for each instrument. So that's 2 instances. There's one instance, there's the other one. What I've done here, this is piccolo's long and this one's piccolo short. Now, this is quite an important concept in orchestral writing, particularly when you're using virtual instruments, and that's of articulations. There's lots of ways of playing a note. You can play a note long or very short, and they're not the same sound. Do you hear the difference between... I can't just... Why did I decide to whistle? Okay, the point is that when somebody plays something short, it's not like just playing a long note very short. It is a different sound. And if you want your orchestral sounds to sound real, you're going to have to start using these different articulations. And the easiest way of organizing this is just to have 2 tracks for each instrument, long and short, okay? So, for example, there's the piccolo. So here's the longs, and here's the shorts. Okay, as we go on, you'll see how all this works. Right. Writing orchestral music can be slightly overwhelming to start with, because even this basic little template we've got going here has got, you can see there, it's got 78 tracks. Now, those of you who come from a band background, okay, we've got 2 guitars, bass, drums, and a singer. This is like exponentially more complicated. No, it's not. You've only got 4 sections: woodwind, brass, percussion, and strings. And there's only 4 main basic functions which each of those sections is going to be performing. It's either going to be playing a melody, it's going to be performing some form of harmonic accompaniment, it's going to be providing some kind of rhythmic drive to the thing, or it's got a kind of texture-y thing going on. So it's actually not that dissimilar to a band, because you've got a lead singer, you've got a rhythm guitarist, you've got a drummer, you know, so there is a direct sort of parallel between the two. And I think if you just think of it as those 4 sections and those 4 functions, the whole thing gets a lot easier. Now, what we're going to be doing is showing you a basic process for how to go about writing this music. So the way you've got 2 basic options. Either you start with pencil and paper or a score writing program and put notes on a page, or, as we're doing in this case, B, you use a digital audio workstation like Logic, Cubase, GarageBand, whatever, and you play or use your mouse to put the notes in. That's how we're going to be doing it. Right. There's one other thing I want to draw your attention to before we go any further. That is, one of the things I'd advise you to do is to sketch before you actually start filling in all the detail. And so for this reason, we have also added to this template some Spitfire labs. These are also free, and there's 2 string libraries which come with Spitfire labs, strings 1 and 2. And so you've got what's called an ensemble patch. So normally, if you had a violin plays down to G below middle C. A viola plays down to a C, an octave below middle C. A cello plays 2 octaves below middle C, and a bass with 5 strings plays 3 octaves down. So they're all covering different range. So the viola's real key range is this bit here, really. Violins can go right up there. A cello, there's kind of, although it can go high, its real happy hunting ground is here. So a lot of these instruments have a sort of real kind of core part of the range, which is what they like. Now, writing string lines in 4 different lines at once is the ideal. That's great, but it's also quite hard when you first start. So what I am recommending is you use a string ensemble patch like this one, because it means that you can play the whole thing in as chords. And then once you've played it in, then you can start splitting lines out. But it just makes it a lot easier when you first get going to get your idea going. Right, let's start actually doing something more useful than just talking. Don't you think? Right. There are so many different ways you can approach the actual business of writing the music. There's sort of melody and accompaniment. We're going to be looking at like 2 or 3 of them just to give you an idea. And as you go through writing your piece of music, you can use variations on this theme as you go. So melody and accompaniment, for example. Okay, so do you remember what I said about thinking there's the 4 sections and there's 4 functions? Now, each section can perform 1 function at a time or all of the functions. The string section can play the lead on the violins. It can have, okay, I'll show you. Why not actually show them, Guy? Right, here we go. So you can have a lead. Okay, then we can have a little harmonic accompaniment, which also is rhythmic. And then we can have a little bass line going underneath. Okay, so there's a string section doing all the functions at once. But it doesn't have to be that way. Okay, so if we decide that we're going to put that same tune, this time we're going to play it on a flute. Okay, so looking at a flute range starts around middle C. Some of them go down a little bit lower than that, but so this sort of section, between about G above middle C and a tenth above that is the sort of happy hunting ground for the flute. Let's now play the flute line in. Okay, and this time we're going to have some soft horns providing the accompaniment. French horn. Here we go. And we can give this a bit of extra oomph by doubling the flute up with an oboe. Combinations are important. We'll come and look at that in a minute. Now, do we want any rhythmic interest in this? We could do. We haven't had any strings in at the moment, and they could provide some rhythmic interest if we wanted. Actually, I'm not going to put that down there because it's slightly fighting with the French horns. So you want to try and think about ranges. So these woodwind parts are sitting above where the horns are, which are sitting just below middle C. So they're quite dominant there. So we definitely don't want anything else which is going to compete, trying to be in the same range, because that might sound a bit naff, frankly. So let's add a cello line underneath that then. That works. If we wanted something more mobile in there, we can put a little harp line up the top. Okay. May have to turn that harp up a little bit. Let's get the harp turned out. Let's find the harp and turn him up. Where have you gone, Harpy? Hello, mate. Oh, hello, Guy. What's happening? Where have you been? Oh, I've been busy. Sorry. Okay, so that's melody and simple accompaniment. So you don't have to have the melody at the top. The melody can sit underneath. We can put it on the cello, for example. And then we can have flutes and clarinet providing the accompaniment. Now, there are a number of techniques people use to make the orchestration sound better. One of the things about the woodwind section is it's not very homogeneous. All these instruments sound very different to each other. So piccolos and flutes sound similar-ish, but they sound completely different to an oboe, which creates its sound using a double reed, which sounds different to a clarinet, which has a single reed, and the bassoon has a double reed. So they're all quite different instruments. So if you just had, I'll show you, okay, let me demonstrate. So we'll have a chord where we're going to have the flutes up there and then the clarinets down there. So we're going to have clarinet, flutes on the top, clarinets underneath, and I'll show you why there's a better way of doing it in a second. Okay, now let's add the clarinets underneath. Now, what most people would do is rather than have two flutes on top, two clarinets underneath, is you do something called dovetailing, where you'd have, so you might have clarinet, clarinet, flute, flute. So the flute and the clarinets are sort of woven inside each other. I'll show you. Now we put the flutes inside that. Right, let's listen just back to that, just the woodwind by itself. You see how they sound all blended together. That's dovetailing. Another common technique. Okay, I'll tell you what, let me just leave those up. No, I'll do something else. So if we have, let's go back to having French horns doing the, okay, brass can do the harmony this time. So we're going to have, here's another common technique. What you do is you put the French horns are in what's called close position, so that they're playing close triads. But the trombones are going to play much more broadly spaced. So broadly speaking, as you go up the keyboard, harmonies tend to come close together and the big gaps tend to be at the bottom. And that sounds good. So what we're going to do is we'll play in these close harmonied. And now we'll add to that some trombones. Which are going to be much more broadly spaced, yeah? Like that. Here we go. Okay, that sounds all right. Now we're going to add, the strings are going to do the melody line. So let's... Now, a very common technique is to put the strings in octaves. So we'll put violin 2 up an octave, playing exactly the same line. So instead of playing this, we're going to have a violins in octaves playing this. And what you can do, actually, is you can start, and this is another common approach to orchestral writing, is you develop a build, basically. So you start with something simple, and then it gets bigger and bigger, so that you're getting this emotional wave which builds as the tune does. Another common technique in orchestral writing is, and all writing actually, is to have... Can you hear those dogs? Bane of my life. Anyway, where were we? Right, so we got the flute line going there. Now we're going to put in an answering voice. In other words, so this goes space. Do, 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 do. Do you see what I mean? So we want a little thing to fill in the gap, but reflect the main tune. Okay, we don't want it to continue after the tune comes back in again. Okay, that's all right. Now maybe second time round, when the tune needs a little bit more support. Common doublings, flute and strings, flute and oboe, they go quite well together, as we'll now find out. Okay, now we can introduce a little contrapuntal thing here. Counterpoint's a really interesting idea where you run the same well, there's a number of different ways. It means it's more than one line. What a terrible explanation. It's been a long day. Okay. Guy fails to explain counterpoint in any serious way at all. Okay, let me try. Let's try John. Am I going to add a contrapuntal line on a little answering phrase on the cello? Maybe that's the easiest way of doing it. So, yeah, I can. Okay, so that little line there. Okay, what we're going to do, here we go. So we're going to add a little contrapuntal line, which is going to go on the cello. But I'm going to start it later, so it's a little canon. Whoop. Oh! The answer is Windows 10 does not like counterpoint. Blue screen of death! Ah! I'll be back in a minute. No, I won't, because I've lost everything. When was the last time I saved it? Who said writing orchestral music was easy? What idiot decided that was a good idea? Oh! We didn't lose that much. 10 minutes later, here we are, back where we were. Right, I'm thinking twice about this, putting this in 3 octaves. I don't think we need to do that. And actually what we could do, what you would do with a real section, violin one, there's more violin ones than anybody else. So what you can do is you can call divisi them. So if you've got 14 players in your section, you divisi them. So 7 play the top line and 7 play the bottom line. And it sounds great. That means we've now got violins 2 to do something else with. Right, now we're going to add our little answering phrase, which we were about to do, weren't we? Take fate in my hands. So then it morphed from being a canon to becoming a harmonic part of it, because I then started playing a bass line which went with the rest of it. So we've got this ba, 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 coming in there. Now what we might do, this is the kind of line, if we want this line to have a bit more prominence, then we might well double it with another instrument. And right now we've got a whole load of clarinets and bassoons and all kinds of stuff up there, and they're just sitting around reading the paper, you know, playing on their phones, doing all that. So what we could do is copy this over, add it to bassoons and cello. Sound great. Let me just show you this doubling, and then we can try bassoons and clarinet. Quite like that. I think that's all right. Let's now move it on. Let's see how much of that can be played on the clarinet, because the clarinet range may not be long enough. I preferred it where it was, actually. So we're going to definitely put it on the bassoon. So here, let's listen to in context. But what we have lost in here is all the sense of motion. So we've lost the rhythm element. So we've got the melody, which is coming out of the violins, with a counter melody coming from the cello and the bassoons. The harmonic content is coming from the French horns and the trombones. So what is going to happen? Well, there's another way we could approach this. One is we could add we could add some motion in another part of this, like strings or something. But what I was going to try, see if the brass, no, don't like that. But equally, I'm not absolutely sold on these big wodgy brass chords either. So maybe we will go for, we could go back to, okay, we might do it. We can add a little bit of piano in, see if this, what this does. Okay, that sounded all right. So what we've also got going on here is an ostinato. So you've got, if you look at this piano, the piano part in particular, which is doing the, that kind of thing. I could do another video just about ostinati, actually. It provides both rhythm and harmony. Look, it's actually a little bit like a thing called an Alberti bass, but so there's a chord of E flat. So we've got rhythm, we've got harmony, That's when it goes up to the A flat. Look, E flat, A flat, and C. So we got a second inversion of A flat. The reason I'm doing that is because I don't want it to feel really sort of permanent and stable. I want it to feel as though it's about to transition into something else. And by using inversions, it slightly undermines the sense of finality. That's what I think. Okay, let's do this thing. Ready? We haven't brought our basses in yet, and obviously that E flat is where we're going to bring them in, because, as I said before, if you want the sense of building in terms of range, you want to broaden it out. So it goes from narrow to, as it gets bigger, it's also getting deeper and higher. So it's not just getting louder. We're just, although it is getting slightly louder, we're bringing in instruments which add substance and weight, top and bottom. So we're now going to bring in the basses on the bottom there. It's very common to write cello and bass in octaves. And it sounds great, sounds absolutely lovely, but you don't want to do it all the time. It's just too predictable. And if you've got a decent sized string section, the basses are more than capable of standing on their own 2 feet. You might want to support them with some low woodwind, for example. That's another good doubling. So we could put in if we had a contrabass bassoon, but we're already using the bassoon to reinforce that that cello line, so we're not going to be able to do that. But you can hear actually what happens towards the end of this little sequence here, this little section. The cello and bass do go into octaves, and just listen to that bit there, because at the moment they start with the cello doing its slightly. Then the cello is going to do the contrapunct line. Now they're in octaves. Now, see, that sounds it sounds satisfying. It's a very, very common technique. I know it works. Now we're going somewhere else. What we're nearly done, I think, because I mean, the 3 things I wanted to try and show in this particular little example, 3 really fundamental approaches to writing orchestral music, is the melody and accompaniment, is using these little answering phrases, and it's a sort of contrapuntal idea to sort of fill in the gaps, reflect the melody in other parts, handing the melody from one section to another. This idea which we started out with of this, the 4 basic blocks: texture, melody, rhythm, harmony, which I always seem to say in a different order just to confuse you, and the 4 sections of the orchestra: woodwind, brass, percussion, and strings. So you're starting to see, although this might seem complicated, actually, if you break it down to those block structures like we started with, it's not. And you've got a clear idea of what needs to happen in each place. And what's missing when you feel something's not quite there, and how you've got to handle these transitions very carefully from one section to another. Now, we've just been playing this in without sketching at all, which is what I tell you not to do. But when you're first starting, you will find it easier if you sketch, and you will find it easier if you work out your harmonic regime and stick to it. So there's all these things are building together. So I think I've got as far as I want to go on this today. And I've actually picked up a whole load of little threads, which I probably need to pick up in future things, not just about orchestral writing, but writing in general. And so when you approach your piece of orchestral music, which you're going to do, aren't you? You're going to download the Discover library. You're going to stick this kind of template together. You're going to download the long version of this video and the template for Cubase and Logic, and a little kind of cheat sheet which gives you some of the stuff I've been talking about but written down. Then you're going to have a go and you're going to see what you can do. I would advise you, with this in mind, and particularly thinking of sections of the orchestra and the 4 functions: melody, harmony, rhythm, texture, listen to lots of live orchestral music and see how many of these things you can hear. Hear where themes are handed from one section or one instrument to another. Hear where what role is each section playing, and how has the composer managed to keep and build and develop this idea as his or her piece evolves. So listen to lots of live orchestral music. If you're able to look at some orchestral scores, because even if you're not a really fluent sight reader, it's incredibly useful just to look at the score and you see who's doing what where. Even if you aren't absolutely sure what the notes are, it doesn't matter, because scores organize exactly in this order. So if you're used to looking, once you get used to seeing woodwind, brass, percussion, strings, you look at a score, it's the same. Yeah. Start with something simple and short, like 8-10 bars, and just something you can finish, so that or try differently. Take one basic theme and see how many different ways you can find of arranging it. That's really, really useful. And sometimes when you start moving on from that, start using sort of templates, little structural templates. Okay, I'm going to do 4-bar intro, 8-bar theme 1, 8-bar theme 2, a theme 1 variation, then theme B, then back to big finish on theme 1. If you map it out like that, it's much easier to work out. Then you can say, block out who's doing what. Okay, I'm going to start with woodwind and strings doing texture. Then I'm going to bring in my theme on the French, etc. Do you see how this works? Good, my work is done. Okay, now that's about all I've got for you today. I'll be back again very soon with more of this kind of stuff, and we'll try writing some music in a completely different style, or we'll do something synthetic, or I don't know. You let me know what you want, and I'll do it within reason. Look, hope you've enjoyed this. Download the stuff underneath this, and I'll catch you very soon. Bye-bye.